So if the first part of the first reading was kind of confusing to you, I'll explain it. It's about, it's not about camping, although it is about tents. It's actually about cruise ships and the way we treat our bodies. Now, I don't have any first-hand knowledge of cruise ships. I had to confess up this morning that the only cruise ship I've ever been on is the Good Time 3 or 2. It's been that long. But I watched the ads, and we used to watch The Love Boat. So here's what I know, or I think I know, happens on cruise ships. Cruise ships are pretty much about partying. There's that. And people treat their bodies as if they were cruise ships. That's pretty much what St. Paul said in the first couple of chapters of Romans. Remember when we read the first couple chapters of Romans 20 weeks ago? When we started reading Romans, at the very beginning, today is the 21st Sunday after Pentecost, and right after Pentecost we started reading Romans, and we got Romans 1 and 2, so it's 20 weeks ago roughly. And St. Paul said there are people in this world that pretty much treat their bodies as if they were cruise ships. And apparently for some people the only thing that they know how to do with their bodies is to party with them. Okay, that's what they think bodies are for, is like one lifelong party. Okay, when you get off of work, what do? You party. And that's what their bodies are for. And so, they don't have any other plan. They don't have any other thing. What are we supposed to do with that body? We don't know. We just party with them. One cruise ship after another, or one cruise after another with the same cruise ship. Now here's a difficulty that you have with that. When your cruise ship is relatively young, you can do all kinds of partying, I guess, with it without too many ill effects, but you get a cruise ship that's my age and it's going to be kind of hard to keep that up after a while. So you got to watch it. And that's really not much of a biblical image of our bodies. What does the Bible say our bodies are like? It doesn't say it, we're like cruise ships, but yet, not a whole lot of people in this world pay too much attention to what the Bible has to say about a whole lot of stuff anyway, so that's okay. I mean, we don't have to force that upon people. It's just that that's what people are like. They're cruise ships. We just want to party. What is our body like? We don't really have a real good grasp, sometimes even as Christians, as to what our bodies are like. Sometimes as Christians what we do is we when we die, we're going to get buried, and we're going to go to heaven, and someday there's going to be a resurrection, and what happens to our body, and what's it going to be like in the resurrection, and there's all those kind of questions, and where we're going to recognize one another in heaven, and is our body going to be glorious like Jesus was? Because after all, Jesus rose from the dead, and he appeared to his disciples, and he had a glorious body, and they could recognize him because they could tell the scars and so forth. But he was able to pop in and out of buildings without apparently having to unlock the doors. And so is that going to be us? So we're going to have new and glorious bodies. And what's that going to look like? And the people that we know and love who died and went to heaven, are we going to be able to recognize them in heaven? And what kind of bodies are they going to have? And am I going to, when I die and go to heaven, what kind of body am I going to have in the resurrection, for instance? Am I going to have a 60-year-old body, or am I going to have my 30-year-old body when I'm in heaven? And if I have my 30-year-old body, how are you going to recognize me in heaven? Because none of you knew me when I was 30 years old. So how's that going to work? Except Bev, my wife. So how's that going to work? Name tags. Maybe. I don't know. See, there's all these questions and we just don't, you know. And for a long time, for a long, long time, the Christians have thought, butterflies. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. We could be, you know, you think how butterflies are. You know, there's caterpillars, and then when winter comes, they kind of go into cocoons, and then they come out as butterflies. And we know it's the same critter, but it's different, right? And so we're kind of like caterpillars, and when we die, we get buried, and when we get raised up again, we'll be like butterflies. We'll be the same, but we'll be different, and it'll be wonderful, and it'll be glorious. And so the butterfly, for centuries, that's been a picture of what the resurrection will look like, okay? So, and that's why I have these butterflies up here, okay? To remind us that's what the resurrection is supposed to, might be like. I don't know it. You know, if I were a caterpillar crawling around on the ground and saw a butterfly, I don't think I would look at it and go, that's going to be me someday. I wouldn't have a clue. Okay? So, I don't know. But, here, in this chapter, we do get a clue. We get a pretty good clue of what heaven is. I almost said like, and I'm not going to use the word what heaven is like. Because it's not about what heaven is like. It's about what heaven is. But in order to talk about what heaven is, we have to start with what this life is. In this life, these bodies are not cruise ships. These are, St. Paul used the words, tents. Now, I don't want you to think the kind of tents that you used to take your kids camping in, Coleman tents, pop-up campers, you know, those fifth wheel things you have to pull behind those big trucks, you know, with propane tanks and showers and kitchen things. None of that. This is not what we're talking, luxury camping things, you know, KOA camping or even scout things. I don't even want you to think of the kind of tents that some of you camped in the Army in. You know, this is not what we're talking about here. I'm talking about homeless people, things that they live in. Okay? And maybe you've seen them on television. Maybe you've seen them if you go in the right kind of places in Cleveland or even Worcester or someplace. I'm talking about a thing that looks like maybe a couple of pallets standing up against each other with a tarp over it, a couple of blankets, an old refrigerator box, you know, with some graffiti on it, and stuffed inside there's a couple of blankets that are glommed from a shelter someplace, a couple of old winter coats from last winter's Goodwill, you know, that got thrown out and nobody else wanted, that kind of stuff. That's what these bodies are. Not just mine, but yours too. That's what he means when he says, these bodies that we have right now, they're like those kind of tents. Nothing glamorous about it, nothing big and glorious and wonderful and, ooh, let's go to the RV show and buy this thing. This is whatever can be pulled together, you know, to kind of help us to shelter from the storm kind of thing. That's what these are. Pieces and parts kind of pulled together to give us a little bit of shelter from the elements and from the storm. And when you're a kid, or even younger, you don't realize that. You get older, you start to realize how much of this is all pieces and parts. You know, like, if you think about something that a homeless person would pull together in an alley to give themselves a little bit of shelter, you know, an old refrigerator box and a couple of pallets and a tarp and a blanket and so forth, you realize that those pieces don't last very long and they wear out, and the tarp blows off and whatnot. And some of us begin to realize, there's things that go thin up here and things that wear out down here. And, there's a piece here that needs to be repaired and a piece here that needs to be replaced and a piece here that needs to be replaced and that kind of stuff. And, after a certain age, and I'm getting to that age, you're thinking about all the pieces that need to be replaced because they're wearing out. Okay? Just like people who live on the streets. The tarp blew away, I gotta get another tarp. That piece of cardboard rotted out, I gotta get another refrigerator box. And we do that. People are always doing that after a certain age. Well, we just don't go to the back alley to get another one. You have to go to the Cleveland Clinic or University Hospital to get another part. What I'm saying, what St. Paul is saying, by the power of the Holy Spirit, what the Bible is saying, is this. Christians, this side of heaven, we are homeless people. We're homeless. This side of heaven. And these bodies that we have are like the thrown together kind of thing that homeless people live in to take shelter from the storm. This isn't a cruise ship. It's not a trailer. It's not a camper. It's not even a house. We're homeless as long as we're in these bodies. Because our true home, our real home, is in heaven. And it's our home because Jesus has done everything to make it our home for us. From his birth, his time in the manger, his time on earth, his suffering, his death, his cross, his tomb, his rising up, his ascending into heaven, all of that, so that he can make it our home. Do you remember the time when he said to his disciples, "In my Father's house are many mansions. I'm going there to make a place for you to stay"? He did not mean, oh look, I've got a couch up there. Let me put a blanket on there. You can sleep there for as long as you need to. You don't get to sleep on the Father's couch. That's not the way it works. He doesn't have a futon that he's going to pull out. Or say, I'll throw a couple of pillows on the floor. Let's get out your Dora sleeping bag and you can sleep on the floor. It doesn't work like that. You're not a guest. You're not just some kind of overnight. Heaven is your home. And my home, Jesus is there making it home for you. This isn't a place to stay because you're a guest or because you're camping out or because this is what's temporary. That's home. That's the whole point, you see, of everything that Jesus did. And and Christians, we kind of know that, but it doesn't always come together. But we do know that, and sometimes it does. I mean, so Jesus meets 10 guys along the road. Okay, and they have this disease called leprosy. And it's a terrible disease. And nobody liked people who had leprosy, and they kicked them out of town and so forth. So Jesus meets them. They say, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. He has mercy on them. He heals them. Okay? And 9 of them are like, oh, cool, we're healed. And then what? Well, they have no plan, okay? They just kind of wander off, or healed. This is good. 9 out of 10 of them, okay? And I don't know if 9 out of 10 people in the world are like that or not. I don't know if that's a statistical figure or not, but I think there are a lot of people that are like that. Whatever happens to their bodies, they don't have a plan. Okay? They don't have a long-range idea. They don't have a thing. It's just like, okay, well, like you get sick. What are you going to do after you get well? I don't know. What are you going to do after Jesus heals you? I don't know. Jesus is healing me? Are you kidding me? I don't know. I sometimes think I'm having that conversation with people. What is your plan? I have no idea. One of them comes back and says to Jesus, falls down on his hands and knees and thanks him because he has realized that in his healing, Jesus has given him an invitation home. He's realized that this body that he's carried around that has had this leprosy all these years, that Jesus has said to him, you've been homeless. This is not just, I'm going to fix your tent. This is not just, I'm going to put another tarp on, or I'm going to replace the pallet that's leaning up and got blown away. This is not what Jesus is talking about. That's what we tend to want to do. Let's just replace a piece here and there. Jesus says, in this healing is an invitation that sounds like this. Come home with me. And this man comes back because he heard that somehow through the power of the Holy Spirit, maybe. He heard in his healing Jesus say, come home with me. And he came home to Jesus. 9 out of 10 of his friends didn't hear that. I don't know if that's a statistical thing through the ages or not. I'm not going to go there. But I suspect that there's quite a lot of people that don't hear that. They just hear the healing, you got the part replaced, and you move on. But one of these guys, if only one of those people hear that periodically, hear in a healing, hear Jesus saying, now is your invitation to come home with me. There you go. That's what Jesus says to all of us and has said to all of us. And you've heard it. You've heard it somewhere along the line. Many of us heard it even when we were little, at the time when our parents brought us to baptism, and for the first time, Jesus said, now you can come home and be part of the family. But sometimes we forget it, sometimes it gets into the back of our mind, sometimes it gets lost in the shuffle. But the whole idea is, everything that happens to us in this life is part of our homelessness. It's what happens in the next that is part of being at home. It's not about, years ago, I got this idea that this was about the tent and all this other stuff, and I don't know. Coming back from vacation, and how nice it is to, it's kind of fun to be on vacation, and you come back from vacation and it's good to be home. But, listen, it's more than that. It's not like this life is a vacation. It's like some of you have been, maybe not as homeless as a homeless person, living on the streets, but some of you have been homeless for a while, whether it's because of some kind of damage to your home, or whether it's because you've been in between the sale of one home and the closing of another home. you know, where you've had, what are we gonna do, where are we gonna stay, and how are we gonna live, and that kind of stuff, and stuff has been in storage, and other stuff has been God knows where, and, you know, that kind of jazz, and, you know, so you kind of get the idea of what, you know, it's not just coming home, it's being able to, after a long time of that kind of uncertainty, and having somebody finally stand in front of you with a key in their hand and saying, here's the door key to your home, and the, you know, that feeling comes over you and says, yeah, this is the place. This is it. And Jesus stands in front of us and says, here is home. And it's with him. And he stood in front of those 10 guys on that road that day and healed them of that leprosy and offered them the key, and only one of those guys saw it for what it was and came back. And he stands in front of us every time that we get a healing, every time that we even, you know, get over a cold. I'm not talking about a major surgical intervention. I'm talking, you get a cold and you get over the cold. Jesus is standing in front of us and saying, it's your time, you know, your invitation to come home. Remember it? And we can say, yeah, I remember it. One of these days, Lord, you'll bring me home. Because this life isn't about, and what we do with our bodies in this life isn't about cruising and partying and all that other stuff, and it isn't even about, you know, making sure we get from one day to the next. That's not what this is about. This is about saying, you know what, in this life we're just strangers, we're homeless. All us old Lutherans remember the hymn, I'm but a stranger here. Heaven is my home. And one of these days we'll get there. In the meantime, every time we hear that invitation from Jesus, remember, I asked you to come home with me, come on. And we say, yeah, I remember. We look around at other people, and maybe that 9th guy on that road looked at those, or that 10th guy on that road looked at those 9 other guys. And maybe he went back from that after he thanked Jesus and went to those and said, you know what? I got a home now. Why don't you guys come with me? You got a home too. And maybe that's all we need to do. Maybe that's all we're asked to do. Just say, I got a home now. Why don't you come with me and live at home with us and with Jesus? That's all we're saying. That's all Paul is saying. That's all I'm saying. Will you turn to page 3 with me in the pink worship